Hey everyone, this is Lisa Baudouin. Thank you so much for tuning into my chat room. Today in this video, we're going to be talking about water safety. And the reason that this topic has come up was due to the fact that there were 2 young teens that died last month in Lake Michigan around where I live. If you get something from this video, please like, subscribe, and share. And make sure to throw a comment down below. Now, when I started thinking about the subject of water safety protocols, I was obviously focused on my own city, but in thinking further, these videos might be a great start for any community, and also too, for any parent to use in implementing water safety protocols into their own parenting playbook. So this video is part of a new playlist called For Safety's Sake, and this is the water safety series. Might be 3-part, might be 4-part, not quite sure. Whatever direction I take. It basically started because one of the persons that died, their relative was my friend. And so that's why I'm involved. And I'm actually very humbled. If I can help in any way, I will. Remember, I'm a child abuse survivor, but I'm also a survivor coach. So, and it doesn't always necessarily mean about violation. So if I can help in any way, that's what I try to do. And so I'm just starting out here, so bear with me on all of this. So what I did was I thought about things mostly. What are the things that I'd like to address when it comes to water safety protocol? A lot of people might say, who the heck are you? What do you think, you're a know-it-all? No. Thing is, I don't know much about water safety. It's almost as if I'm learning for the first time myself. And that's what I'm going to be talking about further in this video, about getting that education about water safety protocols. But I've created databases for many companies and then my own databases. So I do a lot of tutorials too of how to use these databases. So first off, with water safety overall, it should be understood that going boating or swimming in any lake, a pond, a swimming pool, a river, being on a pier, or walking on the breakwater rocks, or even being in your own bathtub has the potential to go from a very fun experience to a very serious one, with different modes of potential risk, which are basically broken down into minor injury, critical injury, and fatal injury. We will touch base again about the potential risks a little bit later on in the video, and in a future video, we'll combine them and brainstorm to make a list which I call the Water Safety Prep Plan. But for now, let's get back to my conversation with the Common Council on the suggestions that I had. What happened was on September 2nd, which was a Tuesday, I got up and I spoke at the Common Council. I had a 3-minute speech. That's all you get. And I'm posing some questions, which the first one was about signs. Now, if you really think about it, signs are actually a part of the water safety prep plan, part of what should be focused on prior to being anywhere near water where we could get hurt, such as falling off a pier or swimming in deep waters. But there are times people don't even pay any attention to signs. So that's why my first suggestion was about signs, and wherever there was no lifeguard present, or where there's something which is called a no swim zone, meaning it is very risky to try to be in those waters due to riptides, undertows, strong currents, etc. I believe there should be a sign in red with a no swimming and no lifeguard pictogram with words that say no swim zone in big letters. Underneath that, though, I think it's very important that there are words that say, warning, if there are no lifeguards present, that means those areas are just too risky to swim in. Now, below that, I think that there should be a warning that if there's an emergency to call 911, and underneath that, I think that the city should have a water safety dispatch phone number where someone could call it and find out where the safe zones are to swim and when the lifeguards are on duty. The next line would have an interactive maps website link of all the bodies of water and wherever it is safe to swim, and again, the times when the lifeguards are on duty. That way, if you don't want to call the dispatch center, you can just do a search on your phone's internet to look up the swim zones and the lifeguard times, but also see the places where you shouldn't be swimming. So that's what I posed to the Common Council. And so the first question was about the signs, the areas that we're talking about today, which is the Pershing Park boat launch area, the Myers Park area, and also to the Cuyahoga beachfront area too. I'll address the other beachfronts in another video. Now, my idea with the signs is that facing the water, you'd have motion sensors. And these motion sensors are basically for whoever's responsible for that area, the park and recs, the fire department, the Coast Guard, whoever they are, where they would have a notification that someone's down on that beachfront. That's all. It wouldn't be in the water, but I do have great ideas about the water too. So I'll talk about that in the next video. But here, when I talked to the Common Council, the first thing I talked about was the signs, but they'd have that motion sensor facing the lake. The second thing was the city website where they'd have an interactive map, not just the beachfront though, any other public swimming, the ponds in the city, things like that. And what you could do is you could toggle on them and it would tell you whether they're safe or not. And then the next thing would be, when is the lifeguard on? The North Beach has lifeguards there, but when they are not there, really, it's not recommended to swim. That was the first part of that, in tandem with another web page that would have videos on water safety protocol, along with a tutorial testing Q&A. Now, I don't know about you, but when I got my insurance, I wanted to get a deduction, so I did the Safe Drivers online. And basically what happens is they show you a little bit about safe driving, and then they have you take a little test, like a chapter test, and then they show you a little bit more, you take another chapter test, and at the end you take a final test. And then if you don't pass it, they tell you which ones you didn't pass, and you just go back and review. It's not about trying to give you a grade. It's just about getting you to be educated. And if you miss something, it's not a big deal. You just want to go back and figure out what it was that you missed. That's the idea I had for this online tutorial. And then the other part of that is, in that webpage somewhere, there would be a question suggestion that a Racine citizen could give to suggest to the city Parks and Rec. And then what would happen is, on that webpage, there would also be upcoming meetings. So when, say, I go on there and I take a test and I have a question or suggestion, I would send it to the city Parks and Recs. And then the next time they have the meeting, they would address and answer that question or suggestion. I think that's a really good idea to have that interactive. Now, the other part of that is where the Unified School District would get involved. And every year they would send home a homework assignment with each child. Now, obviously, you wouldn't have a 5-year-old watch the same thing as a 15-year-old. So there would be age-appropriate videos as far as water safety protocols on that website. Maybe they could have just several web pages for different age groups. That would be great. And then the homework Q&A from the Unified School District would go home with the kids, and the kids would watch it, and the parents would also watch it with the kids, and they would sign off. Because what does that do? That brings in everybody into the circle. That's what we need. And that's what I'm doing. I see a visual circle and trying to fill that in as far as understanding water safety protocols. So we need to have the city, the parents and guardians and students all on the same page. So we all know the same thing. So we all understand it. As a parent and even as a person living in the United States, sometimes I don't know laws. I've missed a couple of years of schooling, but I don't think that really has much to do with a lot of the laws that come along. You know, laws change all the time. And I'm not saying this is a law. I'm saying things change. So I like to try to get up to date on certain things. And sometimes I just learn by things like this, situations that come up. But anyway, point is getting back to that homework Q&A. I think it's really important. Every child in the school system, and even kids that are in daycare, could watch some type of age-appropriate water safety protocol. So basically, those website ideas are the second suggestion that I had. The third suggestion was more to do about the proactive part of it. And that's teaching kids, teaching parents, teaching us knowing all the rules, where it's safe, things like that. So we want to address that, and we want to look at it. We want to look at it back here, and we want to go forward and say, okay, what are the things that can happen with these injuries? So let's talk about the 3 types of injury that we basically can get when we're at the lakefront or anywhere, really. So we've got minor injury. Now, what is minor injury? That's something like maybe you cut your foot. Maybe you sprain your ankle. That could happen in the sand or the water. Maybe some kind of debris hits your leg or something like that. That's a minor injury, something that you're going to recover from, and you're not going to really sustain any prolonged effects. A critical injury and the fatal injuries are the ones we want to focus on. For the critical, it can be anything from having swimmer's fatigue, having cramps. And we're talking about when you're out there swimming. Maybe the water catches you, you get caught in a riptide, you get caught in an undertow, you get caught in some type of a current situation. Maybe some kind of debris smacks you. You don't know because the water can be moving really fast. So those are injuries that can go from critical to fatal really quickly. And we're looking at that gap. And that's the most important part here for you. So how long would it take from those critical injuries to go to fatal? But then from that fatal, the call, who's going to make that call? How long did that call take to make? That's what I want to address and look at on paper. And the reactive part is when you are injured, the response time of the fire department and the EMTs when someone's in the water. Now, I have done some research on that, and I've had some phone calls with people just checking out the response time in some of these incidents. There's certain information I'm never going to get, so I can only make assumptions, and they're not going to be perfect assumptions either. This is something for the fire department and the Coast Guard and the lifeguard station and the parks and recs to work out. But looking at it, the response time is very important when someone goes in the water. You only have minutes to save that person if they're under. And what I was thinking about was having something down at the lakefront so that all the things are there that are needed to be there. Now, I've done a lot of stuff in my career. So I'm a medical assistant. I've worked for several doctors. I've also worked for hospitals, and I've worked for several clinics. One of the clinics I worked for was the Kenosha Occupational Medicine Clinic. And basically what that is a clinic where anybody that is working would come to this clinic. I didn't do the office work, although I'm trained for it, but I would draw the blood and get the urine samples and things like that. And they'd be sent off. We also had an emergency room. And if the person didn't have limb-threatening or life-threatening injuries, then they would come to our little ER. And the doctor would perform his job, and I would assist. And I give shots of Toradol, which is a painkiller, and I would do all the first aid. And I remember there was somebody that had really bad burns, and I did their first aid. I assisted when there were stitches done. I did all that first aid stuff. So anyway, point is that's where I got the idea for this injury trauma management center down at the lake. And so far I've gotten some people that say that's a great idea. And I've had a couple of people that say we've got a lifeguard office down there. And I believe what they're talking about is the Racine Beach Oasis. Now, to me, I personally don't think an injury trauma clinic should be right next to that location because that's more for relaxation. There's bands that go on. I was down there last weekend listening to a band, and then I walked around the beachfront, but there's lots of kids around there. There's lots of stuff. So you'd have to put it up further or down further. And it doesn't have to be huge. It could be a small 2-story building. The second story would be the lifeguard dispatch center. And then the first story would be the injury management center. And they could also be a 2-story garage. And the reason I say this is because then response time is much faster. So instead of people coming from the fire department, which their response time is fast, and again, I'll talk about that in the next video, but we want it faster. And really, there are factors, timings that have to be done. Because when I'm thinking about it, that traveling to getting in the lake and traveling back to a hospital, or even working with somebody right there, that traveling to is really what's most important. Because I believe that the EMTs and the paramedics, they have the equipment they need in their ambulance. But basically, that response time is what worries me because it only takes so many minutes for someone to drown. And it only takes so many minutes for someone to suffer from hypothermia. And so the idea is to look at each one of these response times and to use problem-solving technique. But this is where I'm at right now, just looking at those questions and parsing them out and then just brainstorming and saying, oh, well, maybe they could do this. Maybe they could do that. And the thing is, they might already do it. I don't really know that. My idea is just to get the ideas out there. And if they're covered, great. And if not, well, then the city can take a look at them. And this isn't just about me. When you have ideas, it should be the same thing. You have a right to voice your ideas at the Common Council. You just have to look up the city council's agenda and you sign up prior to the meeting and you get up and you talk to the mayor and the Common Council. All of them are usually there. There's audiences. For our city, we have 3 minutes to talk. So, but the idea isn't that I know it all because I don't know nothing compared to other people. But the thing is everybody has these pockets of expertise and everybody has these pockets of knowledge. And the whole idea about all those suggestions is to get everybody in that circle of knowledge.
And the final suggestion I have is for anyone in the community, no matter who you are, to either form or become a part of an existing water safety volunteer coalition, which sometimes these coalitions are already a part of the city's water safety initiative. The other part of this volunteer effort is that it might be possible to get some type of funding through the city or state, or maybe even form a nonprofit 501c, where volunteers might be able to apply for grants for things such as water safety equipment, but also to have fundraisers and events to raise community awareness. To find out if there's such an effort in your area, you can do an online search or contact your alderman in your vicinity of your community, who should be able to get that information for you.
People like you, me, the survivors of these people that drowned, or anybody in our city to become part of something that I would call something like the Racine Water Safety Volunteer Coalition, something like that. And I already know that there's people that are interested in that and there's some things going on there. So, but this is just an idea I had. And part of that idea came because during one of these tragedies, somebody from their house spotted someone out in the water and they called 911. These people could work in tandem with the Coast Guard, the lifeguard, and the fire department. Could even have little walkie-talkies. They could have little vests, sort of like your crossing guards. And everybody could take a turn and just walk the beach. That would work in tandem with the motion sensors that are on the signs. You see where I'm going? It kind of fills in the dots. So someone would be down there, they could spot somebody, maybe they have a whistle, they could blow their whistle, or at least they could call the fire department or the Coast Guard or the lifeguards or whoever, city parks and rec, and someone could come down and keep a really good eye, especially when they're at a beachfront, that there really is no swimming, where it's quite dangerous. So if you get enough people in the coalition, what can happen is you can just take turns watching the beachfront. Somebody could do it every first Monday from 9 to 10, and you could sit in your car. Maybe you could even have some type of a magnetic sign on your car that makes people know that you are part of that water safety coalition. I think that's really important too, so people don't get freaked out. Who is that parked in front of my house, or who's that parked down by the lakefront? They know that you're sitting there just watching the beachfront. The final thing I'm going to say here, but I'm just looking at this camera and I'm saying, please, if your kids are going to take and get in that water, you really should have them take a water safety class. Now you can go online and find water safety classes probably in certain places in your city, and even sometimes they run them free. So anyway, those are the suggestions that I had. And now what I'm doing is I'm filling in the spaces, and I'm going back and I'm looking at these suggestions, and I'm trying to hook up with the people that would answer these suggestions. And again, I'm not a know-it-all, but I am really good at organization and just seeing things a little bit back further so that everybody gets on the same page. And where you would actually take this information and you'd create that parenting playbook and you'd put this water safety information in the tab, which I'll talk about more as I go along here. But I just wanted to mention, those are basically the suggestions I had overall, but I actually just scrunched them into 3 and talked for 3 minutes. So after this video, do some research of your own. Go check your city's website for water safety protocols, where it's safe to swim. Make sure you sit down with your children and have these conversations and drum it into their head. And hopefully I've given you enough information where you can see where I'm going. And in the next videos, I'll be talking more and more. I'll just be moving through that circle of suggestions of things that I found out. So I'm going to be making a few of these videos. This video is dedicated to all the beautiful souls who've lost their lives due to water tragedies. Please say a prayer for their families. And please, educate your family on water safety protocols and keep this a topic of constant conversation with your children, because together we really can make a difference in our loved ones' lives. Thank you. That's it for this video. Thanks again for watching, and please like, subscribe, and share, and post a comment below. And as always, please stay safe and stay healthy, and I'll see you again next time here in Lisa's chat room.